Hi there. Welcome to Inner Shift, the starting point for your journey of self-discovery and inner transformation. Every video here is a small step to help you live more mindfully, become stronger, and feel more whole. If you're looking for daily inspiration to grow and better yourself, you're in the right place. There are nights when you're just lying there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Your phone's dead, and honestly, so is your energy. It's been a long day, you've worked hard, given your best, but no one really noticed. No thank you, no clear result. And you start wondering, what am I even doing this for? Is it just responsibility? Is it the money? Or is it for someone who once expected something from you? That feeling, tired but not knowing exactly why, sad but for no clear reason, is something almost everyone goes through at some point. It's not physical pain. It's more like emptiness. Like you're alive, but not really living. That's when I came across Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl, a man who survived the death camps, where people were reduced to numbers, stripped of everything. And yet he wrote, "We cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose how to cope with it, to find meaning in suffering, and in doing so, move forward with dignity." That book didn't hand me the answer on a silver platter, but it gave me a question. What are you willing to suffer for? And once you start answering that question, even in the smallest ways, those empty, silent nights, they start to feel a little less dark. That's what led me to take a deeper look at the book itself. One of the books that truly shaped the way we see inner growth is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. His story reminds us that even in the darkest times, we still have the power to choose how we respond, and in that choice lies our freedom. Here at Inner Shift, we carry that message with us. That meaning isn't something we find outside, but something we create from within. Man's Search for Meaning is one of the most powerful and influential books of the 20th century. It was written by Viktor Emil Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist and neurologist who also founded the third school of Viennese psychology, logotherapy, which focuses on finding meaning in life. The book was first published in German in 1946 under the title Ein Psychologe erlebt das Konzentrationslager, which means a psychologist experiences the concentration camp. It was later translated into English in 1959 as Man's Search for Meaning. Since then, it's been translated into over 30 languages and has sold more than 16 million copies worldwide. Viktor Frankl was born in 1905 in Vienna, Austria. He was a well-known doctor and psychologist, best known for founding logotherapy, a form of psychotherapy that focuses on finding meaning in life. Frankl was Jewish, and he was one of the few who survived the Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz, where his wife, parents, and brother all lost their lives. It was these deeply personal and painful experiences in the camps that shaped the first part of his book. That section reads like a powerful, emotional, and thought-provoking account of human suffering, survival, and the unshakable belief that life can still have meaning, even in the darkest of times. Man's Search for Meaning isn't just a memoir. It's a powerful mix of personal story, existential philosophy, and psychological theory. The book is divided into two main parts. Part 1 is about Frankl's experience in the concentration camps. He describes the harsh, inhumane, and deeply challenging conditions of life inside the Nazi death camps. But instead of just telling the story as a victim, he writes from the perspective of a psychologist, observing human behavior, searching for signs of kindness, inner resistance, and asking one big question: why do some people survive while others give up? Part 2 introduces logotherapy, Frankl's own approach to psychotherapy. He explains his belief that the search for meaning is the central force that gives people mental strength. According to him, while we can't always control what happens to us, we can always choose how we respond to it. What makes Man's Search for Meaning timeless isn't just the story of survival, it's the deeply human message behind it, that no matter the circumstances, even in the worst situations, we still have the inner freedom to choose our response and find meaning. This book doesn't offer a formula for happiness or cliché advice. Instead, it invites us to face life with courage, honesty, and hope. It's been taught in universities, used in personal development programs, and has inspired millions, from people going through personal crises to leaders, doctors, and scholars around the world. First, our last and deepest freedom as human beings is this: the freedom to choose our attitude, no matter what we're going through. Even while he was trapped in the inhuman conditions of the Nazi concentration camps, Viktor E. Frankl, the author of Man's Search for Meaning, held fast to a profound truth. We can always choose our attitude, even in the darkest of circumstances. He called this the last freedom, something no one can strip away, even when a person has lost every possession, all external liberty, or is staring death in the face. In the first part of the book, he writes, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." That line is more than a statement, it's a life philosophy. Between what happens to us and how we react, there is always a space for choice, and it's that choice that defines our dignity. Frankl isn't offering an abstract theory, he backs it up with what he actually saw in the camps. Even in those brutal surroundings, some prisoners still shared their last crust of bread, comforted their bunkmates, and protected their personal dignity, while others chose cruelty as a means of survival. He recalls, "We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof." In other words, even when we can't change our circumstances, we can still decide who we will be inside those circumstances, kind and self-sacrificing, or selfish and despairing. Digging deeper, Frankl explains, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. That gap between the event, the stimulus, and our reaction is where our free will, self-awareness, and personal responsibility live. It's also the foundation of logotherapy, the therapy of meaning he developed after the war. Even in suffering, if a person can discover a sense of meaning, they gain the strength to endure and overcome." Losing a job. Turning crisis into opportunity. When someone suddenly loses their job, they can either fall into blame and self-pity, or choose to grow, upskill, and find a new direction. In fact, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many who were laid off started their own businesses, learned new trades, or went back to school, and ended up discovering a whole new purpose in life. Facing serious illness, finding meaning in survival. Many cancer patients, instead of giving up, choose to live their remaining days with gratitude and purpose, inspiring others along the way. Take author Chris Carr, for example. Diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, she went on to write books and spread a message of healthy, self-loving living. They couldn't change their illness, but they chose how to face it, with courage and meaning. Growing up in poverty, holding on to dignity and integrity. Some people grow up in deep poverty, discrimination, or broken homes, but instead of becoming bitter or ashamed, they choose to stay kind, work hard, and rise above. Many successful entrepreneurs were once orphans, immigrants, or victims of abuse, but they chose a path different from what life had planned for them. In relationships, choosing forgiveness over revenge. In love or friendship, people get betrayed and hurt. Some choose to hold on to anger or seek revenge, but others choose forgiveness, healing, and moving on with grace. That's what inner freedom looks like, not letting the situation control your emotions or your future. In everyday jobs, living with purpose through the small things. Frankl often said that even the most ordinary job can be meaningful if it's done with love and a sense of service. A street cleaner who keeps the city clean each day, a nurse who gently cares for patients, a teacher in a remote village giving kids hope. All of them can live meaningful lives by choosing to show up with purpose and responsibility. Our attitude isn't just a quick reaction, it's the core of who we are. Frankl showed us that true freedom isn't about our external circumstances, but about our inner ability to choose, our self-mastery. And that's something every one of us has. When we truly understand and live by this philosophy, we stop seeing ourselves as victims of life, and instead, we become the ones who shape the meaning of our own journey. Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. During his time surviving the Nazi concentration camps, Viktor E. Frankl came to a powerful realization. The search for meaning is what gives people the mental strength to endure hardship. This idea became the core of his philosophy, and it's captured perfectly in a famous quote he often referenced from Nietzsche. Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. This quote reminds us that when a person finds a strong enough reason, a purpose, a why, they can withstand almost anything: suffering, loss, despair. Inside the camps, Frankl observed that the ones who survived the longest weren't always the physically strongest. Often, they were the ones who still had something to live for, a loved one waiting for them, unfinished work, or an unfulfilled mission. Frankl himself endured those hellish days because he dreamed of reuniting with his wife, and believed he had to survive to finish writing a book on logotherapy, which he had begun before his arrest. Fast forward to modern life, and this idea is just as relevant today. A late-stage cancer patient may fight through painful treatments not just to survive, but to attend their daughter's wedding, or to finish writing a memoir. A single mother may carry the weight of life's struggles because her why is the future of her child. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic, many people lost everything: jobs, homes, loved ones, and yet they got back up because something still gave them a reason to keep going. Family, community, or even just their belief in their own worth. And here's the deeper truth. A why doesn't have to be something grand. It can be something simple but meaningful to you. Something that reminds you your life has value and it's worth continuing. Without that sense of meaning, people easily fall into depression, feel lost, or give up when things get hard. But when your heart is anchored in a strong why, no matter how harsh the situation gets, you find a way to rise. In the end, it's not our circumstances that define how we live, it's the meaning we attach to them. When we find a why strong enough, we unlock the strength to face what life throws at us. That's the core message of human resilience that Frankl wanted us to remember and live by. Suffering stops feeling like suffering once it finds meaning. One of the most profound ideas Viktor E. Frankl shares in Man's Search for Meaning is this: pain doesn't have to break us, provided we discover a purpose within it. Drawing on his own experience and observations inside the concentration camps, Frankl states, "Suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice." In other words, pain itself isn't what destroys us, it's the absence of a why. When we connect our suffering to a purpose, saving someone, proving our loyalty, protecting what we believe in, pain becomes part of a meaningful journey rather than blind punishment. Real life is full of examples. A frontline doctor during a pandemic keeps pushing through exhaustion because those hours are saving lives. An adult child patiently cares for a bedridden parent, motivated by love and duty. Para-athletes train through daily discomfort, turning their pain into proof that the human spirit can inspire and transcend. In every case, the hurt is still there, but it no longer crushes the spirit because it now serves something greater. Meaning doesn't erase pain. It transforms pain from an enemy into a teacher. It forces us to confront ourselves, test our limits, rediscover our values, and tap into hidden strength. Strip pain of meaning, and despair creeps in. Anchor pain to purpose, and we stand firm. That's why Frankl could survive the camps. He saw his suffering as the raw material for a philosophy that would help heal millions. When hardship carries meaning, it stops being pointless weight and turns into a lever that lifts us above our circumstances. The way a person accepts their fate, and all the suffering that comes with it, gives them a chance, even in the worst of situations, to deepen the meaning of their life. In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor E. Frankl emphasizes again and again that our attitude toward fate, especially toward suffering, is the true measure of our dignity and depth as human beings. He writes, "The way in which a man accepts his fate and all the suffering it entails gives him ample opportunity, even under the most difficult circumstances, to add a deeper meaning to his life." This powerful statement reminds us that we are not entirely defined by what happens to us, but by how we choose to respond to it. It's our inner attitude that makes the difference between a life broken by suffering and a life elevated by meaning. Frankl believed there are situations, like illness, loss, or death, that we simply cannot change. But if we can face those situations with courage, awareness, and intentional acceptance, we open up space for self-discovery, for deeper values, and for becoming the kind of person we truly want to be. That's how suffering is transformed into dignity. In real life, we see this truth over and over again. Someone loses their ability to walk after an accident, but instead of giving up, they become a motivational speaker, like Nick Vujicic, who was born without arms or legs, and now travels the world inspiring others to live with purpose. A childhood abuse survivor chooses not to remain in pain, but instead studies therapy to help others heal. These people didn't choose their circumstances, but they chose how to live with them. And that choice gave their lives new meaning. Going deeper, acceptance of fate doesn't mean giving up. It's a quiet kind of inner courage. When we can no longer change what's happening around us, the one thing left is to transform what's happening inside us through compassion, clarity, and resilience. But if we resist with bitterness or denial, we often sink deeper into frustration and despair. So in the end, the way we face and accept our fate determines whether our pain remains just a wound or becomes a turning point that makes our life richer and more meaningful. Frankl lived this truth himself. He took the unimaginable losses of the concentration camps and used them to shape a therapeutic approach that has helped millions find meaning through suffering. And that's the message he leaves us with. We don't always get to choose our circumstances, but we always have the power to choose how we live through them, and that choice is what gives our life true value, even on the hardest days. No matter how hard the present is, never lose sight of the hope that the future can be better. During his journey through the hell of the concentration camps, Viktor E. Frankl discovered a redemptive truth. The way a person faces and accepts their fate, including all the suffering that comes with it, determines the depth and value of their life. He wrote, "The way in which a man accepts his fate and all the suffering it entails gives him ample opportunity, even under the most difficult circumstances, to add a deeper meaning to his life." This quote isn't glorifying suffering, it's pointing to something more powerful, that our response to adversity is what truly shapes our dignity and spiritual maturity. Frankl believed that when we can no longer change our circumstances, we still have one last freedom, the freedom to change how we see and accept our fate. And in that process, we uncover deeper parts of ourselves, our courage, our integrity, and our inner sense of purpose. In real life, we've seen countless examples of people who turn their suffering into strength. Take Malala Yousafzai, the young girl who was shot in the head by the Taliban just for going to school. She didn't respond with hatred or surrender. Instead, she embraced her fate as part of a greater mission, becoming a global voice for girls' right to education. Or Stephen Hawking, who lived most of his life with a motor neuron disease that left him almost completely paralyzed. He couldn't change his condition, but he chose to live with purpose, dedicating himself to science, inspiring millions with his work and his spirit. They didn't choose their fate, but by accepting it consciously, they gave their lives a depth of meaning that reached far beyond personal limitations. Looking deeper, when we accept our fate instead of resenting it, we move from being victims to becoming creators. This isn't passive surrender. It's a deliberate, powerful choice, one that helps us preserve our dignity and opens the door to inner growth. On the flip side, those who reject or rage against their fate often spiral into negativity, confusion, and eventually lose touch with who they truly are. So in the end, it's clear, fate may not be our choice, but our attitude toward fate always is. And it's in that choice, when we accept with strength, that we don't just survive, we step into a new dimension of living, a place where life is no longer just about getting through, but about discovering meaning, shaped and sharpened through suffering. From the powerful pages of Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor E. Frankl does more than tell the story of how he survived the concentration camps. He gifts us a timeless philosophy. Meaning is the compass that helps us push through suffering, guides our actions, and protects our dignity no matter the circumstance. Even when stripped of freedom and forced to stare down death, hunger, and cruelty, Frankl shows that one freedom remains untouchable: the freedom to choose our attitude. Because of that, he insists, those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. And once pain is linked to purpose, it stops feeling like pointless weight and becomes the bedrock for a deeper life. Frankl's ideas aren't just theory. They're proven every day by real people, from single mothers and cancer patients to human rights activists who meet hardship with conscious, positive resolve. Their lives echo Frankl's message: a deliberate, hopeful attitude is humanity's most noble answer to fate. In a world full of suffering and uncertainty, man's search for meaning isn't merely a book. It's a roadmap that helps each of us find light inside our darkest moments and live a life that matters no matter what we face. Thanks so much for listening. If this message spoke to you in any way, I'm really glad we got to share this moment. Take care, stay grounded, and keep searching for what gives your life meaning. See you next time.